Why I love the idea of a Big East ACC merger. You're locked on.
You are Locked On UConn, your daily podcast on the UConn Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Before we dive into today's show, just want to take a moment and say how thankful we are for all of you. We appreciate all the fan support, from YouTube downloads or views to audio downloads. We're proud to say we're the only daily podcast covering the UConn men's and women's basketball programs, the hoops capital of the world. And of course, we work on some football stuff as well. We're thrilled to bring you the coverage you deserve, and to show that gratitude, we're giving back. We're donating 10% of our revenue to Husky Ticket Project, helping send kids to UConn games who otherwise would not be able to. If you're enjoying the show, take a moment to subscribe, follow, and leave a review wherever you listen. Thanks again for making Locked On UConn your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. So you heard me right. I would love the idea of a Big East ACC merger. And I'm not talking about us just joining the ACC and leaving the Big East altogether. This is an incredible idea that wasn't just floated by Coach K. It was floated by yours truly. May 17th, 2024, I had myself and the author of the Dream Season pod, Matt Edwards, was on my show, and I said, what if we had a big merger? And we were talking about maybe relegating some teams and having some fun with it, because nobody wants to see BC in an advantageous position, even though they're financially secure, according to some folks. That would be my only issue from a fan perspective. But this merger could potentially be so transformative that it could redefine the landscape of college sports really forever. Because if we're only talking about football being the driver and football being the, who pays the mortgage, that essentially the basketball money is like, how you pay your cell phone bill and your utilities. I think the potential of a Big East ACC mega conference merger would change that. And so let's be clear. This is the only way I'd support UConn joining the ACC. If you're going to take UConn out of the Big East, you'd better take the entire Big East. And it's not just joining the ACC as it exists. No, it's about creating something entirely new and rebranding to a super league that merges the best of both conferences into the premier conference. I don't want to have any Atlantic Coast nonsense on there, because Cal is in the conference, SMU is in the conference, Pittsburgh, Marquette, etc. And I think it's implied if 28 teams are in the same conference that it's big enough. So to call it the premier conference is what I would go with. And why this would work is because this isn't about UConn just chasing Power 4 football money. It's about creating a future that's essentially bulletproof, as Dan Hurley likes to put it, right? A foolproof league. It thrives across both football and basketball. The concept is simple. Separate the media rights deals for both football and basketball. That's a structure that Brett Yormark of the Big 12 has already introduced with the Big 12. And it's something this new league could absolutely adopt, because there's enough markets, there's enough teams. This would not be small potatoes. This wouldn't be 12 years, $500 million like the Big East got today. Terrible, terrible deal. The brilliance of it, football remains on the traditional networks like ESPN, Fox, CBS, wherever, ensuring those big Saturday matchups stay accessible. Basketball becomes kind of the crown jewel of the streaming platforms. And maybe there's some football aspect of it too, but I'm just talking about right now. I think this is the way you go. And if you're thinking that's far-fetched, think about how many people are freaked out about UConn being on Peacock. But let's look at Netflix for a second. They're already proving they can handle live sports. After the Mike Tyson, Jake Paul debacle, which was a charade, where it was like, 65 million people are trying to stream and it, blah, blah, blah. It was, spinning, check your internet, all that stuff. So after that one instance, Netflix has already proven with Christmas Day football, they can handle this, because their formula is, one, the coverage was stellar. They brought in, mercenaries, people who are on other networks to do the show. So it's people that you know from different networks. The coverage was phenomenal, recognizable, and it's also why it's game changing is this reason right here. Think about this pitch. 28 schools, 28 unique markets from Connecticut to California, from Pittsburgh to Dallas. Imagine games streaming on Netflix or Amazon from September through April, bringing high-quality broadcasts to your living room. But the pitch from the schools would be about targeted marketing. Why streaming is going to be outbidding legacy media, cable companies like Fox and CBS and ESPN is because they can double dip. When you watch a show or you watch a series on Amazon Prime or Netflix, you have the choice to pay more so you don't have commercials, or maybe you have one commercial at the beginning and then it's uninterrupted throughout, right? But with football or with basketball, you have TV timeouts. There's no pay-per-view basketball games. There's no pay-per-view football games. It is truly a broadcast. So not only are they getting the streaming rights to this, but they're also getting the rights to broadcast and get advertising money that they wouldn't normally get. So that's the double dip. They're making so much money on these streams because they're targeting you, the consumer, who's paying them, and you give them all your information, your debit card, your address, where you live. They have the IP address of where you're streaming from. So all of that is incorporated into how they target the marketing to you. And so if they can do that with 28 different schools, it would be a no-brainer, and it would be billions and billions of dollars worth of money to the schools. Okay? Because this wouldn't be like, $500 million for 12 different schools, and we'll split that up. And, after all the rights deals and everything, you get like $5 million each. This would be akin to the $6 billion deal that the Big 12, the SEC, all the money. Think about Notre Dame. If Notre Dame as an independent wins the college football playoff, they're getting $20 million like a clip every time they win, because they don't have to share it with anybody. So this would be the exact same type of deal where we are as a basketball first school, but we also have football in our mega conference. We have the ability to kind of personalize this where it's an incredibly large deal to the streaming platform that bids on it and wins it. That is the pitch. And then think about the nostalgia factor. Now you don't have to worry about, hey, oh man, we're going to the Big 12 and all the games are going to be like the Big 12 championships are in Kansas City, which great city, cool people, but it's not New York and it's not Madison Square Garden. You don't lose that because there would have to be a lot of factoring into like how many teams make the tournament. You'd probably have to do like a 18-team tournament in Madison Square Garden, and 10 teams don't make it, but that's life. They still get the money. They still get the money for being in the mega conference, for being in the premier, the TBC, the TPC, the premier conference. But at the same time, we recognize the reality that college basketball is often seen as it taking a backseat to football. So this doesn't do that. You have the ACC football schedule, adding UConn as the 18th team. It's injecting resources to them from a football perspective. They still get the football money. And from UConn's perspective, you get the basketball money and you get the football money. If you're a basketball-only league in the mega conference, in the TBC or the TPC, then you basically don't get the football money. Maybe you get a small portion of it, 20%, to allocate more resources. But it's a win-win, and UConn would be in absolute heaven to have the Big East Conference as it is, merge with the ACC, so you still get some fun new rivalries. And I don't think it's a pipe dream. It's not at all. Streaming is the future. Whether it's Netflix, Amazon, even Apple, hungry for live content, they have the money, and all they need is the wherewithal for one conference or multiple conferences to approach them and say, what would you pay us to stream all of our content on your platform? And why wouldn't they want to partner with a league that offers a basketball product, the best talent and rivalries in the sport, a football league that spans every major time zone and appeals to no national audiences, but could appeal to everyone if it's good? Then the product was pretty good last year in the ACC. Not great. Fan bases that are loyal, engaged, support their teams in this new era. For UConn fans, it would be about surviving these changes in college football sports, the revenue sharing model that's coming down with the House settlement. It would ensure they're in a Power 4 conference, and it kind of solves a bunch of different angles of this. So buckle up. I think this idea could be the beginning of something that is truly revolutionary, because the TPC, the premier conference, let's make it happen. ACC Big 12 Big East merger. I love that Coach K and Rick Pitino are on board. We're going to talk about their thoughts on this coming up after the break. Attending the new 12-team college football playoff is an incredible experience that brings fans together like never before. Ohio State and Notre Dame are in the final, and I can imagine that the excitement of these fan bases to play that game in about 6 days is all about making new memories, hopefully good ones for whatever team wins it. Gametime has an amazing new feature called Gametime Picks that makes finding tickets even easier. It filters out the fluff to show you only the best deals on the great seats, saving you time and effort by cutting through the noise. When it comes to getting tickets for the best events, I've already started planning how I can use Gametime to set my parents up with amazing seats for the Big East tournament, especially since they live close by. They're a train right away. These games are truly unforgettable, and the idea of watching them live is something I'm excited to make happen. So let's take the guesswork out of buying tickets, everyone. Use Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Gametime app today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn, talking Big East ACC merger. Our old pal, Coach K, recently proposed on his podcast, I think he was talking to Chris Patola, this exact idea. And it's what made me think of doing a deep dive of like what this would look like, right? But here's what Coach K was talking about. You know, they merge. It's a mega basketball conference. He said this merger would restore both conferences' relevance on the national stage in an era dominated by the SEC and Big Ten's financial muscle. The historical significance of this is it would unite two of the most prestigious basketball conferences, combining the ACC's blue bloods like Duke and North Carolina with Big East blue blood, UConn, whether you want to call them that, I don't care. You know, programs like Georgetown and Villanova. Like, to have those 5 teams in the same conference would be phenomenal. You know, creates a competitive footprint, such as a league would house 12 of the last 15 NCAA basketball champions. Like, who could mess with that? Nobody could. And it's not about resting on your laurels. It's not about, you know, who's relevant now. Duke's number 2 in the country. UConn's 14th. North Carolina's having a tough year, but Georgetown's having a resurgence. Villanova's kind of on the upswing. So adding some additional revenue to these teams, imagine the ability that just take UConn, for example. And I know Dan doesn't like to flex NIL money because, let's face it, he wants to build a team. But UConn with unlimited NIL resources, with Dan Hurley's ability to find talent and develop them, would be an unstoppable force. It just would be. Nobody wants to see UConn in a Power 4, because if they start getting football money and the type of money that is going to allow them to pay coaches what they should be paid, the resources that they have for the football program are already pretty phenomenal. But if they got more, and all of a sudden UConn's a football power on top of a basketball power, the brand would soar. And so it just, the financial stability of all of this would be about pooling resources, and the traditions of the two conferences could secure lucrative media deals like we talked about. I think exceeding the SEC and the Big Ten. If you're talking going after the streaming companies, it 100% would be get ahead of the SEC and Big Ten. Because if you don't think they're thinking about that, you're crazy. Like, I know that you guys don't want to spend, you know, $9.99 or $16.99 a month to watch, you know, Big East basketball. But if it secured UConn's future, wouldn't you? Would you spend $50 a month to watch high quality UConn basketball and football and other sports that are encompass the new Big East ACC, whatever it's going to be called, merger? I know I would. And I think if you're struggling to keep up with the SEC and the Big Ten, it's an opportunity to regain ground. The Big East would benefit from the ACC's infrastructure and football revenue, and that would create a stable environment until you can kind of get that whole split deal where the Big East conference, or the Big East side of it, the basketball side of it, throws the basketball on like a streaming platform. But it's not just about logistics; it's about the matchups. Think about the different rivalries that would come about. Imagine a yearly clash with Duke at Cameron, or them coming to stores. And obviously, because of how many people are in the conference, it wouldn't happen every year, but almost like an Olympic event. It's like 4 years from now, we're going back to Cameron. They're coming up to stores next year, and then you take 2 years off or whatever it is. But they're still a conference foe, and you can still play them in the conference tournament. I think that's the biggest thing. How about a rematch of Villanova, North Carolina, one of the greatest NCAA tournament games of all time, where Marcus Page hits that 3 off balance to tie, and then Chris Jenkins hits that buzzer beater off Arcidiacono's dropback pass, like at the buzzer. I mean, that's probably the best NCAA tournament game final of all time, easily. And so I want to see it, guys. Like, I don't think that there's anything that would stop it other than people just being like, I guarantee there's going to be 20 people in my YouTube mentions that are like, this will never happen. You're ridiculous, blah, 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 blah. Well, guess what? I'm a guy who always goes by the man in the arena. And it's not about the critic who counts. It's about the people who are going to go about and talk about it and be about it. And if guys like Coach K are talking about it, Rick Pitino, you just have to get the presidents on board to kind of actually start getting into a room together and realize that this would actually make a lot of sense for both conferences and all of these schools that are involved. All right, last segment of the program. I want to talk about what a wild scene this would be if we created this TPC coming up after this. After the holiday hustle, there's nothing like getting your home a little TLC. I always find that decluttering and refreshing my space helps me get it back into a routine, whether you're tidying up, clearing out, or just want to give your space a new look to start the year. Wayfair has everything you need that's all within your budget. Recently, I decided to tackle my home office, which had become a bit of a catch-all, and I wanted a desk that was functional but also could fit my style, something clean, modern, not too bulky for the space. Wayfair made the process super easy. I found the perfect piece that not only checked all my boxes, but also fit my budget. The best part, the delivery was completely hassle-free and quicker than I expected. Even for a larger item, every time now I walk into my office, it feels like a whole new space. It's bright, organized, has me excited to dive into my work. Wayfair really helped me start the year off right with a home that feels refreshed and inspiring. Give your home the refresh it needs with Wayfair. Head to wayfair.com right now. That's wayfair.com. Wayfair, every style for every home. All right, you're back on Locked On UConn with your host here, Mark Zanetto. Find us on X at Locked On UConn, everywhere, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Think about the teams that this is the way I would structure this. I wish I had a graph for you guys to show people that are listening on YouTube. So let's say this happens. That means there's 28 teams in the Premier Conference, TPC. All right. I don't have division names. If you want to throw out some division names in the YouTube or community comments, feel free. But the first division would be the one that UConn's in, and it's very Big East, old school Big East centric. It essentially is the old Big East with Butler, Xavier, Creighton, etc. Right? You have UConn, Syracuse, Georgetown, Villanova, Providence, St. John's, Seton Hall, Marquette, Butler, Xavier, Creighton, Pittsburgh, Boston College, and DePaul. Now, if UConn was running these negotiations, my only stipulation would be we will do this merger, but you have to relegate Boston College and put UMass in to replace them. I'm dead serious. BC is the reason why UConn is searching for Power 4 money. BC is the reason why UConn hasn't been in the ACC for the past 10 or 15 years. So if we can get rid of BC, this would make it even more attractive. But let's just keep them in for now because I don't think that's a true deal. But the other side of it would be Duke, North Carolina, Virginia, Louisville, Wake Forest, NC State, Clemson, Florida State, Miami, Georgia Tech, Stanford, Cal, SMU, and Virginia Tech. Now, if you wanted to mix those up a little bit and do like a division where Duke, North Carolina, and UConn are all on the same side because they're all not that far from each other, and have more Xavier, Butler in with some others, I think you have to separate at least Duke and UConn. And I don't think you can put North Carolina on UConn's division and not have a Duke North Carolina game every year because that's kind of a staple of college basketball. To me, this works, and I know it's kind of basic, and I know it's essentially just the ACC minus Boston College, Syracuse, and Pittsburgh, and essentially just kind of like adding an old Big East and then a new ACC. But we used to have Virginia Tech, and now they're not with us. So I mean, like we gave them that. Miami, Florida State, those guys. So Louisville. So it's not just all old Big East. I think that I think there's a good continuity here. Still, the only thing that's out of place, and this is through no fault of the ACC, is Cal and Stanford. Essentially, are they're just California teams that are on an East Coast a brand. But it is what it is. I think that helps. I think that helps in the long run. If you're going to do this merger, it helps that Stanford and Cal are in California because it adds another time zone to playing these games. Rivalries that would flourish, right? Classic Big East battles, UConn versus Georgetown. We just had that. Villanova, St. John's. New battles, right? Duke versus UConn, a matchup of two programs with the most national championships of the last 30 years, 6 and 5. Villanova versus North Carolina, rematch of the unforgettable title game. How about Georgetown versus North Carolina being a conference game? That's two programs with incredibly rich histories and a couple of Final Four games that people remember. I don't know, this guy named Michael Jordan was involved in one of them, James Worthy, Patrick Ewing, stuff like that. Regional rivalries are renewed, right? Syracuse versus UConn becomes a conference battle again. I know Syracuse sucks right now, but they're not going to suck forever. And if they do, then that's a coaching thing because they have the fan base that wants them to be back where they were Final Four contenders, right? Boston College versus UConn. I will say this. If we ever shared a conference with Boston College again, the only thing that would make me feel good about a UConn versus Boston College game is the fact that UConn is going to smack Boston College around every single time they play, whether it's in Chestnut Hill, Storrs, Hartford. You could play them on the Long Island Sound. UConn is destroying Boston College, and I think the only sport we're behind in against them is football, and that's on the rise. I'd love to play Boston College next year in football. I don't even know if we do. I'm not even going to look it up right now because I'm going to close this show out. But West Coast intrigue, right? How cool would it be, like Stanford versus UConn? Duke versus Stanford, two very prestigious education private schools that are now conference foes. And the most important thing is why this works for UConn. It's a dream scenario. The football program gains stability by joining ACC football's schedule, while the basketball team remains a central figure to a league loaded with now marquee matchups, historical significance, probably another TV rights deal, as we talked about earlier. The stability that it would give football, playing a true ACC conference schedule. Basketball dominance doesn't go anywhere. You get better games against top 5, top 10 opponents regularly. And obviously the media appeal, like we talked about with the rights. I think there's a streaming aspect of this. I think it's an unreal deal. And I'll give credit to Coach K for bringing it up because he certainly has a hell of a lot more clout than I do. So keep talking about it, Coach Krzyzewski, because I'm here to champion it. That is a fantastic idea that I talked about in May of last year. And I will continue to talk about it because this merger between a Big East ACC would create the most competitive and compelling basketball conference ever in history. And it also would create some very, very, very good and competitive football. You can't negate the fact that Clemson has won national championships in the ACC, the fact that SMU went from an American team, went to the ACC and was in the college football playoff. They play like crap, but you know what? I don't want to hear it. Indiana was in the Big Ten and that played so-so. Notre Dame's an independent that everyone's been made fun of, and now they're in the finals. Georgia, SEC has had a tough year. So in terms of like teams playing well in the college football playoff. So to me, going forward, the college football playoff and just March Madness as a whole is a crapshoot because it's going to be about resources, who you have as a coach, how many players you can develop, et cetera, et cetera. So Coach K, love the vision. Love Rick Pitino and Rick Pitino's endorsement. Hopefully Dan Hurley hears about this and jumps on board. I think, leaders in the ACC, whether it's Shire, whether it's Hubert Davis, Steve Forbes, my buddy there, who's the guy in Louisville with the tight shirts? Pat Kelsey, right? Pretty sure that's his name. All these guys need to be on board because this would be phenomenal. And honestly, outside of the travel to California, it's just from like the middle of the country over, and it could be worked out. You're not going to play 28 teams in a basketball conference. You're not going to play everyone every year, but you're going to play 18 games in conference, and it works out. It's going to be like a quad system. We figure it out. That's the take, guys. And honestly, you can crap on it all you want, but if this happens, just remember who talked about it first. I know the date, May 17th, 2024. And I had an accomplice with Matt Edwards. So stay locked on, stay connected, make sure those toughness meters rise. We'll see you on Saturday for the game. Really excited to come up next month and see some of you beautiful people in February and then March. Hey, go Huskies.
Go Huskies.